Fake news. It's a catchphrase that's widely used and even overused in media nowadays. It's splashed across television screens, computer screens, newspapers, and comes up often in conversation. Its sudden rise occurs in 2016 during the presidential election with the accusation of fake news that seemed to follow every single press conference, interview, and debate. For example, the claim that Pope Francis supported presidential candidate Donald Trump was quickly deemed fake news. Word of a supposed chronic illness that presidential candidate Hillary Clinton was hiding was shut down with the infamous phrase, along with rumors that the Clinton duo ordered the murder of an FBI agent. Those are just a few examples of the appalling fake news as explained by Father Benjamin Alforque, a Roman Catholic priest, in 2017. From the examples given in the name itself, one can see that fake news is citing false statements as factual truths. Fake news is also often fueled by extreme emotions and feelings that appeal to the heart of the receiver. According to Cathal Sheeran, who is considered a top authority on freedom of speech, argued in 2017 that fake news is knowingly fabricated, often vicious, politically motivated reports. In the words of Dr. Jonathan Brumet, acting Associate Dean of the College of Graduate and Research Studies at Radford University, argued this year that its information is masterfully manipulated to look like credible journalistic reports that are easily spread online to large audiences, willing to believe the fictions and spread the word. Fake news can be broken down into two separate categories. The first category is satirical fake news, which is both widely accepted and popular among the masses. The most commonly plays out on news shows like The Jon Stewart Show and The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, known as comedic genre. Rather than being viewed as fake, the show mocks or mimics real news shows and serves the function of entertaining audiences. Unfortunately, the integrity standard of news has plummeted in recent years, so the other type of fake news, purposely false information, is also found on the modern political landscape. It's defined as the publication of intentionally or knowingly false statements of fact, or news articles that are intentionally and verifiably false and can mislead readers, according to Brumet. Basically, in this context, fake news is purposely both deceptive and destructive information that is intentionally made to go viral. The most common places where fake news is found are across social media platforms where one can find everything from altered photos and quotes to completely made-up statements. What are the motivations behind producing fake news? Producers of it can be driven by the financial gain they will receive from creating and releasing the content. Additionally, there are also ideological motivation to promote specific principles, beliefs, or people while smearing the competition and contrary beliefs with misinformation. Today, I will trace the history of fake news, its harmful effects on democracy and democratic communication, and its dramatic and unfortunate use on social media. I will also demonstrate the relationship between fake news and the crisis of public hate. For example, one of the points of the crisis of public hate was that for democracy to survive, its citizens must display mutual toleration of political opponents and forbearance, which is avoiding the winning of an argument at all costs. I will show that fake news is preventing those two critical aspects of democracy. I will also show how fake news is impeding good conversational health, another important part of democracy brought out in the lecture. Good conversational health means that people have shared reality as well as respect for a variety of opinions and receptive to those opinions. Fake news has created a scenario that actually is quite the complete opposite of this. In other words, it has created political polarization, the huge divide between conservatives and liberals. A history of fake news shows its evolution and how it has come to have a harmful effect on democracy and democratic communication, especially through its use on social media. With its recent epidemic, one might think that fake news is a new concept. However, that is not the case. Falsified information has always existed and has been a part of online news since its origin. It just did not have the label of fake news attached to it. Evidently, Brumet argues that the equivalent of today's poisonous bite-sized texts and tweets can be found in most periods of history going back to the ancients. For example, during World War I, the British and the Americans used fake news in the form of propaganda, and the Nazis and communists did the same during World War II. Going further back in history, British satirist Jonathan Swift in an attempt to prove London astrologers were fakes, made a false statement about the death of John Partridge, who then denied his own death. This falsity spread all over Europe like a flash, explains Julian Gorbach, professor of communications. Both Benjamin Franklin and Mark Twain were known for hoaxes printed in newspapers that were widely believed and quickly spread. For instance, Franklin describes dancing sheep, and Twain told about a 100-year-old petrified man he found. However, probably the most famous false news event occurred in the 1930s when Orson Welles broadcast on the radio as a Halloween prank The War of the Worlds, a story about a Martian attack on Earth, as though it were a real event. The audience was so manipulated by this media event that people rushed to police stations, had heart attacks, and even considered killing themselves. The 1960s also helped to usher in the fake news phenomenon. During this era, people began to question truth. Truth began to mean whatever anybody wanted it to mean because truth was defined by how people felt about it. Everyone was entitled to his own opinion, and standards for truth disappeared. However, by the time of the 2016 United States presidential election, the term fake news really gained traction. Both sides often threw this word around when responding to each other's information and news. The definition of the term fake news has continued to evolve from being described by journalists merely as manipulated and made-up news stories to a term that, in the words of Brumet, has now been co-opted by politicians and commentators to mean anything they disagree with, making the term essentially meaningless. Fake news today is decimating healthy communication in our democratic society. Propaganda, fake news, and hoaxes are the most complex challenges today's media communication has to face. This is due to the fact that readers are now heavily tasked with the duty of sifting and fact-checking deeply, since information can unfortunately no longer be trusted or taken at face value. There has been such a gigantic change in news because communication is now being altered in new ways and so quickly that the anxiety and the seeking of an enemy comes into play. This attitude prevents pluralism, which is the diversity of views so critical in a democracy, and actually creates hostility. The danger of fake news to our democratic communication also becomes obvious when one considers the points made in the crisis of public health, hate. One of the points was that there are certain principles that a democracy demands. These include living with strangers, tolerating differences of opinions, using effective debate to solve problems, compromising through dialogue, and all this done in a non-violent way. Fake news instead is encouraging people to stick with their own kind, bash anyone who's different, and use violent and angry language rather than reasonable debate. This is quite a threat to democracy. Fake news also damages democratic communication because information is often taken out of context and placed into another situation that promotes the new author and denigrates the other party. This type of media communication practice is incredibly dangerous as the usage of a message out of context can damage the original message, the reputation of the person being quoted, or taint an entire idea/event being promoted. The problem is emphasized further when, according to Bonnie Brennan, author and journalism professor, argued in 2017 that the assault on truth, including but not limited to fake news, alternative facts, and post-truth, have created a moral panic and a threat to democratic life. In addition, fake news ignites hatred and contributes to the public's inability to believe that news outlets provide reliable information. With fake news, the public is unable to engage accurately and effectively in politics. Author Peter V. Paul explained in 2017 that the encroachment of fake news poses a formidable challenge to the generation and documentation of reliable and valid knowledge. To further demonstrate this idea, a study done in 2017 by Alcott and Gentzkow during the 2016 election showed how one fake news story was able to persuade someone in the same way it would take 36 television ads to do. So one fake news story was equivalent to 36 television ads to do. Another point that really brings home the danger of fake news in a democracy is that even when the false report is corrected through fact-checking, people still tend to believe that original fake news. Therefore, belief becomes derivative from one's own personal realities and not something that has proven fact to back it up. Emily Thorson, political science professor at Syracuse University, brought up this devastating fact in 2016 by explaining that exposure to misinformation creates belief echoes, lingering effects on attitudes that persist even after the misinformation is effectively corrected. The existence of belief echoes challenges a major assumption of the marketplace of ideas and a cornerstone of the renewed emphasis on journalistic fact-checking. That once a piece of information has been discredited, it will cease to affect attitudes and preferences. As previously mentioned, social media is the medium in which fake news abounds. Whether financially or politically motivated, the issue of fake news is exacerbated by the ever-increasing popularity of social media. The beauty of the internet is that once uploaded, information, and in this case, fake news, can spread like wildfire. Through social media, in the matter of seconds, fake news can reach people all over the world instantaneously. In addition, due to tribalism, which is strong in-group loyalty, another concept explained in the class lecture on public hate, people are itching for information that fuels their own beliefs, even if they know it's fictitious. As social media continues to provide endless opportunities to have emotionally charged and one-sided discussions, it is important to note that these public discussions, including those about fake news, have implications for society. These unhealthy implications display themselves as social media users from opposing political parties gather in homophilous groups and use fake news to destroy the truth about the other party in an emotionally charged climate. Essentially, homophilous groups are politically motivated and ideologically similar clusters of social media users, all of whom accept and propagate their definitions and uses of the term fake news to other users. Is a form of political polarization and tribalism, is damaging our democracy because it prevents any real discussion or acceptance of other opinions. With homophily flourishing, people want to only associate with others who are the same, and fake news encourages people to only communicate with people of similar traits and beliefs. This type of group also thinking leads to the soldier mentality mentioned in the class lecture on public hate. In that scenario, people will use any reasoning to protect their own group. One can see how fake news is having a detrimental effect on democratic communication. Due to such homophily and tribalism, social media actually restricts accurate flow of information. Since social media has features that allow us to mute or block ideologies that one does not agree with, the big picture is no longer available, thus hindering the communication of diverse opinions and facts needed in a democracy. While social media users tend to interact more frequently, they use technological tools to look for and identify people who are similar to themselves for those interactions. This develops echo chambers, where social media users receive only information which supports their own beliefs, even if it's inaccurate. According to Sheeran, turbocharged by social media, these stories feed off and exacerbate an already strained atmosphere in which fear, cynicism, and hysteria dominate. Tribalism takes over, reasoned debate breaks down, and standards of proof often fall by the wayside. Another dangerous phenomenon that is occurring is that, according to BuzzFeed News study, fake news stories and hoax sites are receiving much more popularity than legitimate news sources, such as the New York Times. This was found to be true also during the final months of the year 2016, to such a degree that the election results may have been impacted. Once again, this is a proof that fake news is having a large effect on our democracy, according to Joel Timmer, digital media professor at Texas Christian University in 2017. Another way that the internet is contributing to the problem of fake news is evidenced through the fact that lay people have become bloggers. While this can be informative and advantageous to a point, many of these non-traditional journalists include their own opinion along with facts in their story. Many traditional journalists then use this information without fact-checking, and once again, false information has been spread on social media. The final aspect of social media, which is adding to this problem, is Twitter. It takes only seconds for false news to be shared and talked about for generations on Twitter. Adding to this is the unfortunate finding, as previously mentioned, that online groups are usually made up of people who have the same traits. In addition, the tweets on predominantly critical or the other side. Unfortunately, a platform which could be used to productively discuss the problem with fake news has instead created more inaccuracies. In conclusion, a look at the evolution of fake news shows how it has come to the overpowering negative force it is today. Citizens have become politically polarized as they seek homophobous groups online to reinforce their beliefs, correct or not. This has created tribalism and a soldier mentality in our country, which has led to a breakdown of democratic communication, or, in other words, the give and take of ideas and opinions in a respectful and receptive environment. Instead, with homophily, people want to only associate with others who are the same or like-minded. Fake news feeds this trend, especially on social media, and encourages people to only communicate with others who have similar traits and beliefs. This problem is critically important socially, politically, and culturally because it's having such a detrimental effect on democratic communication. However, if people become aware of this, they can fight this threat to our democracy and attempt to restore truth and reason. One thing which must be avoided, however, is government attempts to regulate fake news, because in the end, education is the way forward, not regulation. And if all the current alarmism leads to more skilled, critical thinking about the news that we report and consume, false or otherwise, then fake news will have inadvertently provided a useful service.